Hello, my name is Kaika. Now everyone calls me that, but back then I went by Kai just to sound more modern. I'm 42 years old now, but back in 2015 I was a different person. I was born and raised in Kailua on the island of Oahu in Hawaii, United States. That paradise everyone sees on postcards. I grew up between surfboards, luau's on the beach, and my Hawaiian grandmother lighting incense for the ancestors. But at the same time, the Baptist church in the neighborhood was always full and I hated it. Ever since I was a kid, I thought it was all nonsense. Christian God, ancestral spirits, all in the same bag. At the University of Hawaii in Manoa, I became the classic atheist of the group. I devoured Sam Harris Dawkins, watched religious debates on YouTube, and destroyed anyone who tried to talk about faith with me. I repeated the mantra. If there is a loving God, why are there children starving in Africa and tsunamis wiping out whole villages here next to the Pacific? I thought I was the most lucid person on the planet. My life was science, perfect waves at Pipeline, cold longboard beer, and hooking up with a different tourist every week. I worked as a deckhand on a supply boat that supplied deepwater oil platforms out of Honolulu. Good money, high adrenaline, guaranteed party at every stop. I would mock the Filipino sailors who prayed the rosary on deck. Hey brother, save that energy to hold the rope right because heaven won't save you if the cable snaps. Everyone laughed except them, but I didn't care. I was the king of rationalism, the guy who didn't bow to anyone, not to the Hawaiian God, not to Jesus, not to anything. But man, there were nights when I would lie on the bunk, the ship rocking, the diesel engine noise down below, and I would feel a hole in my chest that no beer, no woman, no perfect wave could fill. I called that post-shift bad vibe, took a natural kava sedative and went to sleep. After all, I was strong, I was independent, I didn't need spiritual crutches to live. I was in control of my life. And it was exactly in that arrogance, thinking I had mastered the ocean and existence itself, that the sea, that same sea I loved and respected only as a physical phenomenon, decided to show me who was really in charge. On that night in October 2015, when the sky opened up and hell came pouring down in the form of a tropical storm, I was so sure that only matter, force, and coincidence existed, that I never imagined that just a few hours later I would face something that would shatter every piece of my old belief. I remember it like it was yesterday. We were about 180 nautical miles southeast of Oahu, coming back from a delivery at the Big Island platform. The weather report talked about a tropical depression. Nothing serious, something we had faced dozens of times. I was on the bridge, drinking coffee, mocking the captain who had hung a rosary on the dashboard. If this storm really comes, Captain, is the rosary going to save us? I said, laughing. He just looked at me with that serious look and said quietly, one day you'll need more than that rosary, Kai. Then out of nowhere the sky darkened in a way I had never seen. It was like someone turned off the sun. The wind went from 30 knots to 80 in less than an hour. Waves of 12-15 meters started slamming the hull like they wanted to tear the ship off the map. The general alarm went off, red lights flashing, and I ran to the deck to help tie down what we still could. The rain came sideways, felt like needles on my face. The boat climbed a giant wave and dropped down the other side with a crash that shook my chest. Suddenly, a monstrous wave, the kind we call a rogue wave, came straight at the side. I saw it coming as high as a 5-story building, and there was only time to grab onto a railing. The impact threw half the crew to the floor. I felt the ship tilt almost 50 degrees, the containers on the deck coming loose. One of them brushed past me and fell into the sea. The captain was shouting over the radio, calling Mayday, but the antenna had already been taken out. Within minutes, the supply boat began to heel over. The order was clear: abandon ship. I grabbed my life vest, ran for the lifeboat, but another wave capsized the boat before we could even release the lines. When I looked, I was already in the water, the vest pulling me up but the sea swallowing me again. It was total darkness, only the deafening sound of the waves breaking, the taste of salt and diesel in my mouth. I swam with all my might, but every stroke felt useless. I screamed, cursed, fought the sea, that same sea I thought I understood so well. And for the first time in my life, I felt a fear that wasn't just about dying, it was about disappearing without a trace, without anyone knowing, without it having mattered at all. I was starting to run out of air, my muscles burning, my head beginning to shut down when I thought, with all the anger in the world, if there's any God up there, show me now because I'm leaving. It was a mental scream, a challenge, almost a blasphemy. And it was exactly in that second, exactly when I thought I was going to swallow my last gulp of seawater, that something impossible happened. A light, strong, white, warm, appeared right in the middle of all that darkness. I couldn't feel my legs anymore. My body was heavy, my lungs burning, my vision blurry. I thought it was the end, that the next wave would drag me down to the bottom for good. Then suddenly the entire sea seemed to go quiet for a second. There was no more wind noise, no more thunder. Only a light. A bright, intense light that didn't come from a lantern, nor a boat, nor a helicopter, because there was nothing in the sky. It came from inside the water, rising from the depths, illuminating the waves as if the ocean had turned to crystal. I was paralyzed. It wasn't a hallucination from someone dying, no. I felt the warmth of that light on my face, on my chest, as if someone had placed a warm hand right in the middle of my cold heart. And within that light I saw him. A man. Tall, in white clothes that glowed, his hair wet from the wind, but his face. Man, his face was pure peace. He wasn't swimming. He was walking on the waves as if the sea were solid ground. And his eyes pierced me. It wasn't judgment, it wasn't anger. It was love. A love I had never felt in my life. He reached out his hand to me. And I, who had spent years laughing at those who talked about Jesus, I who had called the Bible a book of fairy tales, I who said religion was the opium of the people. I grabbed that hand without thinking twice. When his fingers touched mine, an electric force surged up my arm, entered my chest, and suddenly I could breathe again. The panic vanished. The fear died right there. I felt a peace that words cannot contain. It was as if all the weight of my mistakes, my arrogance, my loneliness had been ripped out of me in 1 second. He didn't speak loud. He spoke softly, directly into my soul. Kaika, do not be afraid. I am with you. And I knew the moment I heard that voice that it was Jesus. It wasn't an angel, it wasn't a Hawaiian spirit, it wasn't a hallucination. It was him. The same Jesus I had called a myth my whole life. And now he was there, holding me in the middle of the Pacific, in the worst storm I had ever seen, looking at me as if I were the most important person in the universe. He pulled me onto a piece of wood that had come from the ship, a container door, I think, and placed me there as if I weighed nothing. The light continued to surround us, forming a perfect circle. The waves crashed, but none of them reached us. It was as if we were inside a bubble of calm in the middle of hell. I started crying like a child. I, who hadn't cried since I was 10, there, clinging to that wood, sobbing and saying non-stop, forgive me, forgive me. I didn't know you were real. And that was when the presence of God became so real, so strong, that I felt him hugging me from the inside. The fear of death turned into certainty of life. The darkness turned into light. And I knew right there that that deliverance wasn't just from the sea. It was deliverance from my whole life without him. I stayed there, lying face down on that container door, the waves still roaring around us, but none of them reached me. It was as if the sea knew it could no longer touch me. The light didn't go out. It stayed there, soft, enveloping everything like a warm blanket in the middle of the cold of the night. And Jesus. He didn't leave. He stayed by my side. Sometimes sitting on the wood, sometimes standing, walking around like someone watching over a child who had just woken up from a nightmare. I couldn't stop crying. But it wasn't desperate crying anymore. It was crying from someone who had just discovered they were loved. Truly loved. I looked at him and said everything that came to mind. I denied you so much. I laughed at those who believed in you. I said you didn't exist. I was arrogant, proud, empty. Forgive me, Lord. Please forgive me. And every time I said this, he smiled. A smile that healed. And he placed his hand on my head as if to say, it's all right, son. I forgave you before you even asked. Time lost its meaning. Could have been minutes, it could have been hours. I didn't feel hungry, I didn't feel cold, I didn't feel tired. I only felt peace. A peace I never imagined existed. And then the memories started. Not the good ones. The bad ones. I saw my life passing by like a movie. The times I hurt my mom when she tried to take me to church, the times I cheated on girlfriends, the times I humiliated classmates because of their faith. The nights I woke up with my chest tight and took sleeping pills because I couldn't bear the emptiness. And each scene hurt. But at the same time it relieved because he was there, seeing everything with me, and he didn't abandon me. At one point I asked, my voice trembling, why me, Jesus? I don't deserve this. I was the worst of all. And he answered with that voice that goes straight into the soul. I didn't come for those who are already standing, Kaika. I came to find those who were lost. You are mine. You always were. I never left you even when you thought you were alone. At that moment I broke down again. Because I understood. All those nights of emptiness, all the times I felt something was missing. It was him knocking on the door. It was him waiting for me to open. And right there, in the middle of the ocean, began the greatest life change anyone can imagine. I gave everything. Everything. I said, if I come out of this alive, my life is yours. I don't want to control anything anymore. I want to serve you. Use me as you wish. And when I said that, I felt something breaking inside me. Pride, arrogance, atheism, and something new being born. A faith so real, so alive that it felt like my chest was going to explode with so much love. The light began to soften as if saying that the night was ending. I looked at the horizon and saw the first shades of orange. The day was breaking. And I knew that when the sun truly rose, my life would also be reborn. I was there lying on the wood, the sun beginning to rise, when I heard the sound of a rotor. A U.S. Coast Guard helicopter appeared on the horizon. I raised my arm, weak but full of new strength from within. They saw me quickly. The life jacket had a reflector and the ship's APERB signal was still active somewhere. The helicopter descended, the basket came down and the diver pulled me up. When I entered the cabin, the guy looked at me and said, "Brother, you're the last. We thought there wouldn't be anyone alive." At the Naval Hospital in Pearl Harbor, I stayed for 2 days under observation. Mild hypothermia, a few cuts but nothing serious. The doctor even joked, "You look like you spent the night at a spa, not in the middle of a Category 4 storm." I just smiled. I knew why. Meanwhile, the whole crew, the 11 who survived, was gathered in the waiting room telling the same story. Kaika disappeared in the first big wave. No one thought he survived. I listened and just shook my head. I hadn't just survived. I had been carried. Then came the part that still sends chills down anyone who hears it. The Coast Guard officer came with the final report and the printed map. He placed it in front of me and asked, "Where exactly were you holding on to the wood?" I pointed to the place I remembered, roughly where the light had placed me. He went pale. He looked at the map, looked at the helicopter's GPS, looked at me again and said, "Impossible. You were 47 kilometers northeast of the point where the ship sank. The current there is 4 knots southwest and the wind was 70 knots in the same direction. In 8 hours, any wreckage or person would have been dragged more than 60 kilometers in the opposite direction. You went the other way. Alone. Against everything." I started laughing and crying at the same time. The officer thought I was in shock. I wasn't. I was amazed. Because I knew who had carried me those 47 kilometers. I knew who had held the wind, who had made the sea carry me to where the rescue was going to pass exactly at the right time. It was such an obvious, such a blatant miracle that even the Coast Guard guy, who I later found out was an atheist, was left speechless. And you who are listening to me now, have you ever stopped to think if at some point in your life, you were also carried to an impossible place? An accident you walked away from without a scratch, a door that opened out of nowhere, a sickness that disappeared. Was it just luck? Or did someone carry you when you didn't even notice? Tell me in the comments if anything like that has ever happened to you. I want to know. Because after you experience such deliverance, you never look at coincidence the same way again. I got home 3 days after the rescue. My mom opened the door and almost fainted when she saw me. I was thin, bearded, with dark circles under my eyes, but with a sparkle in my eyes she had never seen before. She screamed, cried, and hugged me so tightly she almost broke my ribs. My dad, who is one of those quiet Hawaiians, just looked at me, then at the sky, and murmured a "Mahalo ku'akua." Thank you, God. So softly I could hardly hear it. I heard it. And for the first time in my life that didn't annoy me. On the contrary, I cried with him. In the first days I couldn't speak much. I'd sit on the porch looking at the sea of Kailua Beach. That sea I now looked at with respect and trembling. Every wave that broke was a reminder. He walked here. He held me here. I could no longer listen to secular music without feeling a tightness. I'd turn on the radio and it seemed like every song spoke of the emptiness I had lived. I'd turn it off and start crying again, but this time from gratitude. A week later, on a Sunday morning, I woke up early with my heart pounding. I knew what I had to do. I put on a simple shirt, jeans, grabbed the old truck and drove to the church I had mocked the most during my teenage years. New Hope Oahu, there on Farrington Highway. When I parked the car in the lot, my hands were trembling on the steering wheel. I thought, what if they recognize me? What if they remember I was the guy laughing at the brothers at the door? I took a deep breath, remembered his voice in the middle of the sea and went inside. The worship was already going on. I stopped at the back door, tears streaming down before I even sat down. The song was Oceans, and when it reached the chorus, "You call me out upon the waters," I fell to my knees right there in the aisle. People came to hug me, they didn't even know who I was, but they felt something big had happened. I couldn't sing, I just sobbed. When the pastor called anyone who wanted to give their life to Jesus, I raised my hand before he finished the sentence. I stumbled to the front like someone walking for the first time after years of paralysis. At that altar, I did what I had already done in the sea, but now in front of people. I gave everything. I asked aloud for forgiveness for the years of mockery, atheism, and hurting those who believed. I asked for a new heart, a new purpose. And when the pastor prayed for me, I felt again that same presence of God that had surrounded me in the ocean. But now it wasn't to save me from death. It was to give me real life. After the service, a bunch of people came to talk to me. Some remembered me, yes, and just said, "Welcome back, brother." No one judged me. Just love. And right there I understood that the transformation wasn't just mine. It was meant to reach others too. Today, 10 years after that night, I wake up every day at 5 a.m. before the sun rises in Kailua. The first thing I do is go to the porch, look at the sea and say, "Good morning, Lord. Thank you for another day." I can't start the day without giving thanks. Stronger than me. Then I grab the Bible, read, pray aloud, sometimes cry just remembering that I almost died without knowing his love. Then I wake up my wife. Yes, I married a sister from the church who put up with me during my post-conversion crying crises. And my 2 kids, Keanu and Lonnie, and we pray together before breakfast. I left offshore. Today I work part-time as a surf instructor for underprivileged kids here on the island and spend the rest of my time traveling to tell this story. I've spoken in churches in Japan, Australia, Brazil, California. Wherever they invite me, I go. Because I know there are people out there right now watching this video who are exactly where I was. Thinking God is a lie, that faith is weakness, that life is just about enjoying and that's it. And I need to shout to the world, I was you. And Jesus found me in the middle of the ocean when I least deserved it. The scars from that night. I only have a small one on my arm. But the deepest mark is in my heart. Every time someone asks me if I'm afraid of going back to the sea, I laugh. Afraid? I go into the sea every day to teach the kids. The sea is his creation and now I know who commands the waves. I baptize people on the same Kailua beach, and when I immerse the brother or sister in the water, I remember, it was right here that he saved me. Now it's your turn to be born again. And you who have come this far with me in this whole story, stop for a moment and think. If Jesus crossed an entire ocean, faced wind, current, darkness, and death to find me when I hated him, what wouldn't he do for you today? Maybe he's calling you right now at this very second while you're watching this video. Maybe that emptiness you feel, that anger, that doubt, isn't it him knocking on the door of your heart asking to come in? I don't know where you are right now, brother, sister, but I know one thing. The same Jesus who walked on the waters of the Pacific and carried me 47 kilometers against the impossible is right there by your side now. You just have to reach out your hand like I did. You just have to say, "Lord, if it's you, save me." And he will. Because he has never lost anyone who truly called out to him.